One. Go.
So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Topical Talkology.
Good morning, Andy. How are you today?
I'm doing fine, actually. So, one of the things we want to talk about is victim mentality, and this came about from a BBC article on their website regarding Alicia Ocasio-Cortez, who was talking about how some Republican congressman had actually called her disgusting and called her a bitch and everything, and obviously the video is actually been circulated, so it's there for everybody to see. And I actually happened to hear his version of events, which actually are totally different. But the fact that she's actually stood up in Congress and decided to announce this altercation she's actually had with him, and just by her language just shows for me a type of victim mentality. Because ultimately she blamed this is men's behaviour, as if all men actually behave in this way to be able to do it. So this is what's come about. So do you want to get started on what victim mentality actually is, and what's the difference between a victim and victim mentality?
Okay,
actually?
I mean, well, first of all, she sounds as if she's just riding the toxic masculinity wave, isn't she?
Well, she always has done, but I'll probably give you some context into why this came about, because I think it was someone called Ted Yoho was the congressman who actually apparently called her disgusting, and he said, he's apparently said that her policies are disgusting. And this actually was on something that she said, that poor people should be allowed to go and shoplift. Which I've got to say, for a congresswoman to say that is totally irresponsible. And this is on the back end of what's happening in America about defunding the police and cutting them back, and even New York and other cities, particularly Chicago, have actually seen a massive rise in crime. I mean, astronomical in some cases. So apparently he said her ideas were disgusting and she was freaking nuts, and she's taken offence to that. Now, everyone's entitled to take offence, but actually as a congresswoman, you don't think that someone needs to show a little bit more backbone and have a thicker skin if she's going to be put in if she wants to be in the public eye, to be able to do that. I mean, she gets paid a lot of money for it, but she's not. But she's constantly blaming other people for everything that's going wrong, which is a huge indication of a victim mentality behaviour.
But that's exactly what political correctness is, isn't it? It's blaming other people, and that's effectively what Marxism is. If someone has an advantage of you, they've done it by some foul means, and they need to be deposed as quickly as possible. I mean, she's always struck me as a bit of a braying hyena who's only there because of political correctness, and the fact that she actually does something. Remember, if you act on your ideas, that's the main predictor of success.
Well, look, I mean, this is a woman who, in New York, she stopped Amazon from actually setting up a building or an office over there, in effect of costing, I think it cost that particular county or particular town 25,000 jobs.
How did she prevent Amazon setting up?
She didn't let the bill go through. Well, she didn't let the... She didn't... I don't know all the details or how the Americans actually work on that, but she was apparently the catalyst in stopping it going through. Well, you know thinking that Amazon are actually exploiting people and things like this, rather than the jobs, because people still have a choice as to whether they want to go and work or not. You know what Muslims say?
Muslims say you get the leaders that you deserve. So in these crazy times of political correctness, then you get braying hyenas using the tools that society gives them to wield power, and this is the consequence of it. But going back to victim mentality, I've had a very careful look over the literature and YouTube and the internet, and there's very little that I think is genuine, hardcore psychology. There's lots of self-aggrandizing TED Talks about how people overcame adversity, and there's even a Navy SEAL retired, I think, called David Goggins, who espouses endless, relentless positivity. But but reading between the lines, this unfortunate soul has been this object of considerable trauma in his tender years. Completely lacks self-esteem and is on a mission to seek validation by achieving endless things. And he's lucky, quite frankly, that he hasn't killed himself in his pursuit so far.
I think that's a little bit strong.
No. When I say killed himself, in terms of doing himself an injury, which he himself freely admits, he could easily have done. Ultra running, damaging himself almost beyond repair. In his interview with Joe Rogan, he turned up. I think either Joe was slightly late or he was slightly early, and Joe found him doing push-ups just before the interview. And I would say that he's chasing an objective of filling an empty internal void, which he will never do until he fixes his self-esteem.
But do you not think he's actually doing that? I mean, he's actually obviously self-aware that he's actually got to. Because I think I listened to part of that podcast, and he did say he struggled. He struggled to stand up on stage in front of people and talk and things like this. Obviously. Public speaking is probably the second biggest fear in your life. Death comes after that. It doesn't really. People aren't as fearful as they are of public speaking. But he's taken obviously sort of extreme measures in some cases to actually rectify that. But he's got the mental toughness to be able to do that. So I wouldn't say he's got a victim mentality. I think he's actually aware of his self-esteem issues and how he's dealing with adversity in his own way.
I think
because most people who have victim mentality actually stand still. They don't really do anything. They blame others. He's not taking any blame. He's not taking any. He's consistently looking to move forward. I mean, those are traits of people with a strong mental toughness and someone who's actually willing to actually move forward.
Well, we're going to come full circle back to that then. But I think he is an eternal victim of his low self-esteem and his quest to fill the internal void. And he is not content. He is not at peace with himself.
Well, is that victim mentality?
But he is showing through his physical toughness and his ability to push himself that you can achieve quite a lot. But you see, the trouble is he's complicating the idea of achievement with contentment and happiness, and that it is not. I'm not sure. I can't say that he's demonstrating certain traits. He's probably said. I think everybody, and it's something you said in the car on the way here. Everybody is potentially a victim. I think is that roughly what you said, wasn't it? Everyone's a victim. So now we're looking at victim and victim mentality. So everybody can be the victim of somebody else, simply because everybody can be damaged by someone else. So, and one should never forget that, and that's one of the wisest things that people are told. What goes around comes around.
Yeah, but look, the thing is, here's an analogy I heard a long time ago. And if there were, let's say there were two twin girls, and they both had the same upbringing, and they both got raped. All right, not that we actually, although we can actually sympathise with that. But one woman can actually then go and become an alcoholic and say, actually, I became an alcoholic because I got raped. The other woman goes and becomes highly successful, and she says, actually, because I got raped, I'm never going to make sure anything like that ever happens to me again by taking control and taking measures for it not to. So one actually becomes a product of her own, she becomes successful, and the other one actually then stays still, blames it on everything else, blames it on society, blames it on the government, blames it on all these other aspects. And this is something that we constantly see, particularly in the left wing. It's all everyone else's fault.
Well, you're right. And in fact, Jordan Peterson has a pretty good stab at describing victim mentality, where he says if you have victim mentality, you're simply not taking responsibility. Now, I don't think that's the case. I actually think not taking responsibility is a side effect of victim mentality. And what it really is you're simply not taking control. And instead, you're seeking excuses. And of course, one side effect of that is not to take responsibility for anything. So, for instance, if he talks about the fact that, say, someone's ill, then of course they can say, well, I don't have to take responsibility because I'm ill. But the difficulty with that is, unless you always push yourself to the limit of your ability, then you will forget how to take responsibility. So therefore, and then of course you won't really know even how ill you are anymore. You'll simply just not be taking responsibility. So he talks about it as if it's a habit, and it certainly is. It's a discipline to take responsibility, and that's what we teach our children, to take responsibility. And if you look at, I think one of the key terms, they did a bit of research, and a very nice way of looking at it is victims always ask, why did this happen to me? In other words, to apportion blame. Someone who's not a victim says, what can I do?
Actually, that's a very good point. What can you... Yeah, because they will do. They will say, what can we do about it? Because, for example, you take this whole COVID thing right now, and people put a lot of blame, because of COVID, or because of how the government actually handled COVID. This has happened to me. I've lost my job. I've lost this. I've lost this. And there's no responsibility being taken in terms of, actually, if you want to follow... I mean, I don't necessarily agree with some of the measures, but you can complain or criticise the government all you want on how they're actually dealing with it, rightly or wrongly, on how they've approached it is one matter. But the thing is, if you chose to go to a rave into a park with a large group of people, and you catch something, or people catch something, and there's another COVID spike, actually, who is really responsible for that? It's not the government. They've put the measures in place. You've just chosen not to follow them. If you've lost your job, actually, your job wasn't that pretty much secure in the first place, and you're actually relying on someone else to actually pay you. Because if you look at people who are business owners and entrepreneurs who actually work for themselves, they live in that state of uncertainty and anxiety most of their lives. But the thing is, they just find a way to keep on pushing forward. It's one of the reasons why, business owners who actually are very hugely successful, one, are willing to take bigger risks, but the thing is, they do hold themselves accountable when it does go wrong. Do they not?
No.
As a whole, is
I think
a general point?
No, they don't necessarily. That's a really difficult one, because, of course, CEOs tend to be psychopaths, and they definitely don't hold themselves accountable. And in fact, that's one of the things that protects their psyche. Yeah, that gives them emotional resilience.
Are those CEOs who actually go and work for a large organisation, and they've worked themselves up to that organisation? Or are we talking about someone who's actually built a business from scratch? They will take a certain responsibility. They will take a level of responsibility as to the risk they've taken, and it hasn't worked out.
I think they...
Otherwise, they wouldn't take the risk in the first place.
They're
not risk averse.
They shoulder the responsibility because it doesn't bother them. I think that's the key thing to understand. Whereas people who are not psychopaths find responsibility a lot harder to cope with. And if you think about it, if you're head of a large company and you're responsible for the health and well-being and well-being both of finances and health of thousands of people, that is a considerable responsibility that a normal person probably couldn't cope with. So you do need to be a bit of a psychopath and just not care. And what's also interesting about what Jordan Peterson said is he says that it is the taking of responsibility that gives life meaning. And then he says, well, how do you do that? And he says, you do it in small steps. And he said, in your miserable life, you have to aim low enough. And in fact, not down, but low enough. So it always has to be up. And so when he's questioned about this, he says, well, if you aim too high, you just won't get there.